Good morning to all of you and welcome back to Editorial Discussion. This is Preeti Sagar and I will discuss all such important editorials which had been published in 1 week, in the last week in The Hindu as well as Indian Express. So first topic that we'll talk about, that is about Taiwan. Okay, Taiwan and China, what issues are going on. So Taiwan flashpoint in the Indo-Pacific. In pursuing its Indo-Pacific strategy, India needs to be mindful of the China-US equations in the region. So here, this article is talking about four countries, that is Taiwan, China, USA, India. All right. Why India? Because it is in the Indo-Pacific region. This article is focusing upon in the Indo-Pacific region. Already China also comes, India is already part of Indo-Pacific strategy with USA. So in this, the conflict between China and Taiwan, that needs to understand. Along with this, what is going on right now, what is the current status and why it is in the news, that is important to talk about. So what is the context of this article? Context is that the confrontation is rising between USA and China, and it has erupted into the clash of arms. So in this arena, in this situation, this clash between in China and USA can be seen in Taiwan Strait. All right, so here you can see this. This is Taiwan, and strait is what? The passageway between countries. Okay, so Taiwan is a smaller part, and China is the bigger mainland, and between the land route between, or sorry, the sea route between both the countries, that is Taiwan Strait. Okay, so the encircled part you can see. So from the northwestern side, there is Taiwan Strait basically. So here some tensions or confrontations between China and USA can be seen in the Taiwan Strait region. Taiwan, that is unfinished business of China's liberation under Chinese Communist Party in 1949. So basically earlier it had happened that Taiwan did not want to be part of China. So one of the leaders, the biggest leaders of Taiwan, what he did, he established its own rule in Taiwan, and it keep aloof itself from Chinese Communist Party or from the communism basically in 1949. So by that time, Kuomintang, who has established KMT force under China Kai-shek, okay, Chiang Kai-shek, he lost 1945-49 civil war to Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party forces under Mao Zedong. So Chinese Communist Party that formed under Mao Zedong, he is very remarkable a remarkable person during that time. And Kuomintang, he established KMT. All right, that was in the Taiwan. This KMT party has been established. So basically, they lost in this civil war. And Chiang, he retreated to the island of Taiwan, and he set up a regime over there and claimed authority over the whole of China. And he pledged to recover the mainland eventually. Basically, what has happened during 1949? That was a time when we were moving towards decolonization. India was already free from British hands, and China was also looking for its freedom. All right, so in China, only two parties they emerged. That was Chinese Communist Party, who believed in the communism or socialism, and there was Kuomintang, who believed in the democratic principles. So basically, this Kuomintang, what he did, he retreated towards Taiwan Island, and over there he set up his claim, or he set up his authority. Okay, he set up his rule over there, and he also claimed his rule on the mainland China here, the mainland China, which is marked in red. So basically, he set up its government in Taiwan, that is a smaller island, and he claimed that Chinese population, they also in the favor of this Kuomintang, and he will set China free from the hands of communism or Communist Party. But Mao Zedong, he was a very renowned person or renowned leader by that time, who has established a Chinese Communist Party over there. And this person, Kuomintang, he also pledged by the time to recover the Chinese mainland from the hands of Mao Zedong or from the hands of communism, basically. All right. So before moving on to this, what is the tension of the history of the tension in the Taiwan region? So if we go back to the starting of this tension, so first known settler in Taiwan, that was Austronesian tribal people. So basically in Taiwan, Austronesian tribal people used to live, and they used to think, think that they have come from modern day southern China. Okay, so from southern China, their emergence they used to believe in. So this Taiwan island that seems to first appeared in Chinese records somewhere into 3980 when an emperor he sent an expedition force to explore the area. Okay, and that is somewhere Beijing. Beijing, by the time they used to claim their territory, claimed over the territory in China, various territories. So after brief spell being a Dutch colony. So basically, this Taiwan that used to be under Dutch, or it was a Dutch colony between 1624 to 1661. So under Dutch, it was administered by Chinese or China's Qing dynasty. Between 1683 to 1895, so too many years it was under the ruler, or what say, under the rule of Qing dynasty. All right. So from 17th century, some migrants, significant number of migrants, they started arriving from China. So basically, these people, Austronesian people who used to live in Taiwan, they used to claim their emergence from the southern China. Okay, and this Taiwan island that was under the clutches of Dutch or Dutch colony. It used to be during 17th century, and under Dutch, basically they were ruling under King dynasty. So they were ruled by King dynasty under Dutch colonialism. So from 17th century, some of the migrants they arrived from China in Taiwan, and they often fleeing turmoil or hardship over there. Most of them were Hoklo Chinese who came from Fujian province or Hakka Chinese, and they were from Guangdong. So descendants of these two migrants, they are now far the largest demographic groups on the island. So basically today, if you see in Taiwan, people will have their descendants from Fujian province or Hakka province, who belongs to Guangdong. Then in 19th century, Japan won the first Sino-Japanese war, and King government they had to cede Taiwan to Japan. It means in 19th century, so till 19th century, it was under the rule of King dynasty, but now after losing to Japan in the first Sino-Japanese War, it went to Japan. Then after Second World War, Japan surrendered and relinquished control of territory which it had taken from China. Then Republic of China, that was one of the victors in the war, Second World War. They started ruling Taiwan with the consent of its allies, and these were USA and UK. Okay, so we know that in World War II, what was the basically grouping? So at one side, UK, USA, Russia, so USSR by the time. So these people were formed. Okay, these people were groups. Taiwan under this Kuomintang, this person Kuomintang who has formed KMT force. So basically, it established Republic of China. Okay, as I've said that in the Taiwan island, one government had been established, and this government used to be called as Republic of China, and they were one of the victors of the Second World War, and they started or they established their rule with the help of or consent of its allies, that was USA and UK. Then Chiang Kai-shek's troop, they were beaten back by Mao Zedong's communist armies. All right. So Chiang and remnants of the Kuomintang or Kuomintang government, they fled to Taiwan in 1949, and then this group referred to as mainland Chinese, and then making up 1.5 million people over there, dominated Taiwan's politics for many years over there, and then they only account 14% of the population in Taiwan. So they have inheritance of effective dictatorship, and they face resistance from local people resentful of authoritarian rule, under pressure from growing democratic movement. So Chiang's son, that was Chiang Ching-ku, he started allowing a process of democratization. So earlier it was despotism, then it moved towards democratization. During that time, President Lee Teng-hui, he was known as Taiwan's father of democracy. So he led constitutional changes over there towards a democratic principle layout he made. And finally, he led to the election of the island's first non-KMT president, that was Chen Shui-bian in 2000. It has happened. Then What is the reason behind recent hostility between China and Taiwan? So relationship between China and Taiwan, that we can see it started improving after 1980s or in 1980s. China put forward a formula that is known as one country, two systems, like it has established in Hong Kong. So under this, Taiwan would be given significant autonomy if it accepts Chinese reunification. It means China, this Kuomintang, who was ruling in Taiwan, he said that he will set Chinese mainland free from the communists. So till in 1980s, this hostile situation had been there between China's mainland under Mao Zedong and other communist leaders and this Kuomintang's or KMT leaders. All right. So during 1980s, what has happened? China came up with the formula and it tried to minimize the hostility between Taiwan and China. And it said that China wants to establish one country, two systems. All right, two systems of government. And in this, they will provide autonomy to Taiwan if they accept Chinese unification. All right. So this system had established in Hong Kong already, and it was in the US, and something of a showcase to entice Taiwanese people back to the mainland so that Taiwan could also accept it. But what happened? Taiwan rejected this offer, but it relaxed rules on visit to and investment in China. It means they rejected this one country, two system, but they kept on investing in China. It means big businessmen, they kept on investing in China. Then in 1991, it proclaimed the war with People's Republic of China. So Communist Party, that is called as People's Republic of China. And this Taiwanese government, KMT, that is known as Republic, that was known as Republic People of China, all right, RPC, basically. Yeah, sorry, Republic of China. So that is called ROC under Kuomintang, and this Communist Party, that is called as People's Republic of China, that is PRC. All right. So basically, in 1991, it proclaimed the war with PRC and the mainland to be over. Then there was also limited talks between two sides. Unofficial representatives used to visit each other through Beijing's instance that Taiwan's Republic of China government is illegitimate, and it meant government to government meetings could not happen. Then in 2000, when Taiwan elected Chen Shui-bian as the president, Beijing was alarmed by this, and Mr. Chen, he openly backed to independence. So after a year of Chen got re-elected in 2004, China passed anti-secession law that stated China's right to use non-peaceful means against Taiwan if it tried to secede from China. All right, so this has become one of the point of clash between China and Taiwan. So Mr. Chen, he got succeeded by Ma Ying-jeou, and after taking office in 2008, he sought to improve relations with China through economic agreements. So 8 years after that, in 2016, Taiwan's current president, that is Tsai Ing-wen, he got elected. And she got elected, and she leads the Democratic Progressive Party over there that leans towards eventual official independence from China. So after Donald Trump, who became USA president in 2016, Ms. Tsai, she spoke to him on the phone, and a break with US policy had sent in 1979 when formal relations had been cut down between Taiwan and USA. So despite of these lacking in the formal ties, USA pledged to supply Taiwan with defensive weapons and stressed many attacks by China that may cause grave concern. And throughout 2018, China stepped up pressure on the international companies, forced them to list Taiwan as part of China on their websites, and it also threatened to block Taiwan for doing business in China if they fail to comply their demands. So Ms. Tsai, she became second term president, she ruled, or she governed second time in 2020. And by the time, Hong Kong had seen months of unrest. It means when China gave this idea of one country, two system, it gave the example of Hong Kong that we have given liberation or liberal acts towards Hong Kong, that they also have autonomy. But in 2020, when Ms. Tsai became president over there, she saw what is going on, or country saw, basically Taiwan saw what is going on between Hong Kong and China. All right, so Hong Kong, there was unrest. People wanted to get rid of China. All right, so basically it created a new chaos between the relationship of China and Taiwan. So unrest had been seen, and protesters they demonstrated against the mainland's increasing influence, development. Many in Taiwan was watching closely. So later that year, China's implementation of national security law in Hong Kong that was widely seen as another sign that Beijing was becoming more assertive in Hong Kong region. And during the same time, USA had been intensifying its outreach to Taiwan and reassuring Taipei of its continued support. And last year, in 2020, September, Washington sent highest level State Department official in the decades to visit the island. So Beijing strongly criticized this meeting and warned USA not to send any wrong signal to Taiwan independence elements to avoid severe damage to China-USA relations. And during the controversial visit, China conducted a live fire military exercise in the waterway that separates the China island from the mainland. All right. So this year, President Joe Biden's administration had said its commitment to Taiwan is rock solid. It means it is that much strong. And in the few days of new US presidency, Taiwan reported a large incursion by Chinese warplanes over 2 days. And then on 12th of April, Taiwanese government also said China flew largest number of military jets into its air defense zone for a year. And in that response, US Admiral, John Aquilino, who is head of Pentagon's Indo-Pacific Command, he warned that Chinese invasion of Taiwan is much closer to us than most think. It means USA is now taking a step for Taiwan. Okay, it is defending Taiwan against China. All right. So this is their historical wrongs between China and Taiwan, their historical background, and why this recent hostility is can be seen. All right. Now come back to the editorial. So Taiwan, basically, it remained attention for China. We have discussed why it is there. So basically, Chinese Communist Party, they pledged to reclaim that what it regarded as a renegade province and achieve the final reunification of China that we have already talked about. So Taiwan, that could not be occupied militarily by the newly established People's Republic of China, as it became a military ally of USA during Korean War of 1950-53. And it was described as an unsinkable aircraft carrier, underscoring its strategic significance. So this phase came to an end with USA, and it recognized PRC, that is People's Republic of China, as the legitimate government of China in 1979, which ended its official relationship with Taiwan and abrogating its mutual defense treaty with the island. So USA declared that it will maintain the ability to come to Taiwan's defense while not committing itself to do so. And this is the policy of strategic ambiguity. At the other side, China, which is committed to pursuing peaceful unification but retains right to use force to achieve the objective. And this is its own version of strategic ambiguity. So People's Republic of China, they pursued a typical carrot and stick policy to achieve the reunification of Taiwan with the mainland. And that has held out the preference for peaceful reunification through promising a high degree of autonomy to the island under one country, two system that we have already discussed in this formula, and first which they have already applied to Hong Kong after its reversion to Chinese sovereignty in 1997. So as per the formula, Hong Kong would retain its free market system and its political and judicial institutions and processes for a period of 50 years. And that enabled an extended and gradual transition. So the same had been promised to Taiwan, but with the added assurance that it could also retain its armed forces during the transition period. Integrated economy, we also talked about. What was that? That Taiwan's big businessmen, they have invested a lot in China. So with China itself adopting market-oriented reforms since 1978 and becoming over a period of time a significant economic and commercial opportunity globally, Taiwan business entities, they have invested heavily in mainland China, and the two economies have become increasingly integrated. So between 1991 and 2020, stock of Taiwanese capital invested in China has reached somewhere $188.5 billion, and bilateral trade in 2019 was $150 billion. That was about 15% of the Taiwan's GDP. So by contrast, the shock of Chinese capital invested in Taiwan, that is only $2.4 billion. It means Taiwan has invested heavily in China. But China has invested very less, very less in Taiwan, and the investment through Hong Kong may be considerable. So Taiwanese attempts to reduce the island's economic exposure to China have not been successful so far, and China hopes that the considerable economic benefits what Taiwan business and industry enjoy through a burgeoning relationship with China would weaken opposition to unification. And by the same token, China is also capable of inflicting acute economic pain on Taiwan through coercive policies if island is seen to drift towards an independent status. Now, what are their politics? So Taiwan, which is having two major political parties, that is KMT, Kuomintang party, and which is dominated by the descendants of the mainlanders who came to the island along Chiang Kai-shek in 1949, and that remained committed to one China policy and does not support the independence of Taiwan. Then there is another one, Democratic Progressive Party, and that is more representative of indigenous population of the island, and they also favors independence of Taiwan. So they faced with aggressive threats from China and lack of international support, and demand for independence had been muted. Now, China feels more comfortable with the KMT and is hostile to DPP, that is Democratic Progressive Party. So ever since this DPP under Tsai Ing-wen, we have talked about that she is the current president. So she had won presidential election 2016. Again, she became president in 2020. So China has resorted to series of hostile actions against the island that include economic pressure and military threats. Then these actions had escalated since re-election of Tsai Ing-wen in 2020 elections. Public opinion swung in her favor as China adopted a series of hardline policies in Hong Kong that abandoned one country, two system formula that is promoted by Chinese leader Deng Xiaoping. So China could no longer pretend that model was relevant in any sense of Taiwan's future under Chinese sovereignty. One important implication of such development is that prospects for peaceful unification have diminished, and sentiment in Taiwan in favor of independent status has increased. So the escalating military threats against Taiwan through daily violations of its air identification zone and aggressive naval maneuvers in the Taiwan Strait, these are currently deterrent in nature, and they are aiming at heading off any move towards independence and its closer military relationship with USA. So US does not support a declaration of independence by Taiwan, and it has gradually reversed the policy of avoiding official level engagements with the Taiwan government. So first breach has occurred during Donald Trump presidency when several senior officials that include cabinet level officials visited the island. Joe Biden officials, they have continued this policy. Taiwanese representative in Washington was invited to attend presidential inauguration ceremony of USA. Uh, after 1979 it has happened. So reports have now emerged that US defense personnel, they have announced training with these and their Taiwanese counterpart for some time. And in the new incident which has happened or which has taken place last week, that a US nuclear powered submarine reportedly ran into an unidentified object while in the South China Sea. So China has objected to these US actions vociferously. Latest statement by Chinese President Xi Jinping on Taiwan on 9th October on the eve of Taiwan's National Day responds to these developments, where Mr. Xi said that unification should be achieved peacefully, but added that the Chinese people have a glorious tradition of opposing separatism. And Mr. Xi added that historic task of the complete reunification of motherland must be fulfilled and will definitely be fulfilled. So these statements, these are somewhat less aggressive and impatient than his earlier ones on Taiwan. And this may be related to the recent telephone conversation between President Joe Biden and Mr. Xi, when Mr. Biden reportedly assured Mr. Xi that US would abide by the Taiwan agreement. That is, US would not overturn its one China policy. Now, should be India's role? So these calculations may upset by accident or miscalculation, and recent submarine incident is a warning in this respect. Recent crystallization of Quad, of which India is part, and announcement of Australia, UK, USA alliance occurs with Australia being graduated to a power with nuclear-powered submarine. They may act as a deterrent against Chinese move on Taiwan. but they may equally propel China to advance the unification agenda before the balance changes against it in the Indo-Pacific region. For such reasons, Taiwan is emerging as a potential trigger point for a clash of arms between USA and China. And in this strategy, Indo-Pacific strategy, India would do well to keep these possible scenarios in mind and formulate its policies or strategy in Indo-Pacific region. So basically here, what is the conclusion of this article? Conclusion is that China and Taiwan remained hostile towards each other since beginning. Okay, when independence was going on, decolonization was going on, and such issues we have already discussed about. Then USA, Taiwan was ally of USA, which USA later on declined. All right, sidelined to China. Many changes had been taking place. Nowadays, we can see hostile situation between USA and China, and USA had formed Quad and AUKUS, and these are basically, so AUKUS is a security partnership where Australia has been promoted being a nuclear powered country in Indo-Pacific region, and India is part of security dialogue in the Quad. So here, all such countries, these important countries, they are having their presence in different forms. Taiwan and China both are part of Indo-Pacific. Okay, I mean, it lies in the Indo-Pacific, and their tension may affect China and USA's relationship. India's role may be impacted. So these things had been discussed in this article. So that is all about this. Now, next article is the next step is a constitutional right to health. Presently, any investment in healthcare has failed to translate into a sense of security and sanctuary for many Indians. So basically here, this article is discussing about that right to health should be stated as, or should be graduated as a constitutional right to citizens. Okay, so in the current scenario, any investment in healthcare has failed to translate into a sense of security and sanctuary for many Indians. And what is the meaning of this? That we'll talk about. So contents of this article is what, that people of India, they continue to face individual and collective grief as a result of novel coronavirus pandemic, which is a moral responsibility of our leaders to look ahead and learn the necessary lessons from this. Now, so lesson here is the need for constitutional right of health for all, and the pandemic has exposed and aggravated the cracks in our healthcare systems, which is a lesson that we cannot afford to ignore and not learn. In June this year, Parliament of India had to take immediate measures to make necessary amendments to the Constitution to declare healthcare as a fundamental right. And now the time has come to make this a reality for India. So the population of India, or our people, they never have to undergo the suffering what they have faced recently. So primary question raised over here: what will a constitutional right of health mean for a citizen of India? See, if any right becomes fundamental rights, it means this fundamental rights belongs to every citizen of India since the day when they take birth in this country. And it means none of the situation, none of the state, which is declared as state, none of the state can take away this fundamental right. So this could be explained through the lens of three categories of citizens, how this right to health will be constitutionalized. These are farmers and unorganized workers, women and children. So if we see these three categories, so through the lens of these three categories of citizens, this can be explained that right to health, what as a constitutional right, what will be the meaning of this for the citizens of India. Now, so farmers, they are primary protectors of our fundamental right to life. Why? Because they provide food to us, which is essential for the livelihood, for the life. So the majority remain at a loose end when it comes to their own rights and well-being and that of their families. So without an anchor during times of severe illness or disease, generations of children of small and landless farmers, unorganized, migrant and seasonal workers, they were thrown into bondage and debt by having to pay for medical costs from their limited earnings. Employment benefit schemes do not reach to them, and the ones that do are mostly on the papers what government has provided. So implementation of the right to health may provide simple, transparent, and quality healthcare to those who are most in need of such care. Women, that is another category that bear a disproportionate burden of the gaps in our healthcare system. The taboos and patriarchal expectations surrounding their health lead to immense avoidable sufferings. In addition, social and economic challenges that prevent them from freely and openly accessing the little care that is available. A right to health that would mean that services reach the woman where and when she needs them. A large number of children who belong to the poorest and most marginalized communities of our country, they grow up working in the hazardous situations, whether it is field, mines, brick kilns, or factories. So they are either not enrolled in schools or not able to attend it because of pressing financial needs of the family, and often because of unexpected out of pocket medical expenses. So they are not able to go to school and learn. So moreover, somewhere 1 lakh such children from child labor, bonded labor, and trafficking had been rescued. And when they were rescued, these children are ridden with complex health impacts of working. Primarily, they were facing tuberculosis, skin diseases, eyesight impairment, malnutrition, besides the substantial mental health impact. So such children have been denied a safety net of early childhood care and protection, the consequences of which can be felt for a lifetime. So the right to health will help transition the children in exploitative conditions into a safer future. And a constitutional right to health will transform not only the health and well-being of our people, but it will also act as a leap for the economic and developmental progress of the nation. So in the present situation, any investment in healthcare may fail to translate into a sense of security and sanctuary for the people of India. Instead, the complex and often corrupt means of accessing even existing healthcare only adds to the suffering instead of alleviating it. So the vision for Ayushman Bharat will be strengthened with a constitutional right to health. Immediate financial security that will come with the constitutional right to health will be seen as a measurable impact on family savings, greater investment, and job creation on the one hand, and in the long term, emotional, psychological, and social security of people at the other side. Now, so world which is taking steps, both whether it is big or small step in recovering from the pandemic through foresight in policy and investment, India must not lag behind it. India should also take some steps. So the right to free and compulsory education, that was arguably one of the most valuable legacies of the early government, and the true testament of bold leadership lies in its timely, compassionate, and courageous decision for the greater good. So constitutional amendment to introduce the right to health for India can be the legacy of this government. So apart from education, health is also important. So it should also get constitutionalized. All right. So this is all about this article. Moving on to the next one. Now, next article, that is how Delhi came to see Europe as a valuable strategic partner. So here, India, Delhi means India. All right. So India needs to establish or needs to formulate its relationship with Europe, and how it may appear as a valuable strategic partner. All right. So that we'll talk about. All right. So context is what that last week in Delhi, in-person summit had taken place with Danish Prime Minister, that is Mette Frederiksen. So this was appropriate since Europe looms so large in the Indian diplomatic agenda, and smaller European states, they draw unprecedented political attention from Delhi. All right. So in that situation, this in-person summit between Delhi or between Indian government or with Danish Prime Minister, that was very, very appropriate. Now, if Danish encounter highlighted India's immense possibilities with the smaller European countries, the prospects for large strategic cooperation with European collective have opened up with the articulation of a comprehensive Indo-Pacific strategy by the European Union last month. Another country, that was Denmark, which is a country of barely 6 million people, they can establish a significant green partnership with India, which is a reminder that smaller countries of Europe have much to offer in India's economic, technological, and social transformation. So Luxembourg, that is also a tiny one, they bring great financial clout. Norway offers impressive maritime technologies. Estonia is a cyber power. Czechia, that has been deep strength in optoelectronics. Portugal is a window to the Lusophone world, and Slovenia, they offers commercial access to the heart of Europe through its Adriatic seaport at Koper. And the list goes on. So India begins to realize this untapped potential. There are new openings with the 27 nation European Union headquartered in Brussels. So European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy that got little public attention in Delhi, which is a part of the entrenched indifference to Europe in India's foreign policy disclosure. So to make sure the release of European Union's approach to the Indo-Pacific was overshadowed by the controversial announcements of the AUKUS partnership on nuclear-powered submarine and nuclear-powered submarines to be built by the USA and UK for Australia won't sail the waters of the Indo-Pacific for years to come, but that generated much, if pointless, excitement in Delhi. So European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy, hardly noticed in Delhi, is likely to have a much greater impact on the region more immediately and on a wider range of areas than military scrutiny and security. They also range from trade and investment to green partnership, construction of quality infrastructure to digital partnerships, and from strengthening ocean governance to promoting research and innovation. So defense and security, that becomes important elements of European Union's Indo-Pacific strategy that seeks to promote an open and rules-based regional security architecture, which includes secure sea lines of communication, capacity building, and enhanced naval presence in the Indo-Pacific region. So for the first time in this, since European colonial powers, they retreated from Asia amidst the surge of nationalist movement in middle of the 20th century. Europe is returning as a geopolitical actor to Asia and its waters, that is Indo-Pacific, but the context is very different. Few Asian countries, they view Europe with strategic suspicion. Many in Asia, they see Europe as a valuable partner. So survey earlier this year of policymakers and thought leaders in ASEAN region put the European Union as the most trusted partner in the region after Japan, and ahead of US, China and India are way down the list. As the deepening confrontation between USA and China begins to squeeze Southeast Asia, Europe is widely seen as widening the strategic options for the region. And the perspective is similar in Delhi, that now sees Brussels as a critical element in the construction of a multipolar world. As External Affairs Minister Subramaniam Jaishankar put it, India's strategy is to engage America, manage China, cultivate Europe, reassure Russia, bring Japan into play. So this is India's strategy towards these valuable partners. And for the students of Indian foreign policy, the command to cultivate Europe is certainly new. So during Cold War era, which divided Europe into East and West, that has distorted India's perspective of region. And in the colonial era, both the nationalists and princes developed a wide-ranging engagement with Europe. After independence, India viewed Western Europe as an extension of USA and saw Eastern Europe through Moscow's eye. So as it tilted to the Soviet Union during the Cold War, India developed a policy or political prinkliness towards Western part of Europe, and they took the East for granted. So Europe launched bold experiments to construct a union in 1990s. Delhi had a different set of diplomatic priorities by then. That was salvaging a relationship with post-Soviet Russia, normalizing relation with China, connecting with USA, managing more troubled relationship with nuclear Pakistan. That left little diplomatic bandwidth in Delhi to think strategically about Europe. And when it was asked to explain his remark on cultivating Europe, the Bled Strategic Forum in Slovenia last month, Jaishankar had admitted that Delhi did not devote adequate attention in the past to Brussels. And he also added that Delhi is now focused on developing a strong partnership with Brazil and engaged all its 27 members, big and small, individually. Brazil has last long been ready to dance with Delhi. So what should be the European Union's strategy? So EU outlined a strategy for India in 2018 to focus on four themes, that is sustainable energy modernization, promotion of rules-based order, foreign policy coordination, and security cooperation. At the summit in Portugal in May this year, European Union and India agreed to resume free trade talks and develop a new connectivity partnership that would widen options for the world beyond the Belt and Road Initiative. Above the all, there is a recognition in both Delhi and Brussels that the India-European Union strategic partnership is crucial for the rebalancing of the international system amidst the global flux. So the clamor in Europe for strategic autonomy has certainly increased in the wake of AUKUS that pushed France out of its submarine deal with Australia. Washington has moved quickly to rebuild trust with Paris. In a joint statement, yeah. So in a joint statement issued after talks with French President Emmanuel Macron, Joe Biden affirmed that the strategic importance of French and European engagement in the Indo-Pacific region includes in the framework of the European Union's recently published strategy for the Indo-Pacific. So whatever the specific circumstances of AUKUS deal and its impact on France, USA wants all its partners, especially Europe, to contribute actively in the reconsultation of the Asian balance of power. And European Union strategy, in turn, it sees room for working with the Quad in the Indo-Pacific while stepping up security cooperation with a number of Asian partnerships that include India, Indonesia, Japan, and Republic of Korea, Singapore, and Vietnam. Now, so stronger Europe with greater geopolitical agency is very welcome in Delhi. India that is conscious that Europe can't match America's military heft in Indo-Pacific, but it could help strengthen the military balance and contribute to regional security in multiple other ways. Delhi also knows that Europe could significantly boost India's capacity to influence future outcomes in the Indo-Pacific. It would also be a valuable complement to India's Quad coalition with Australia, Japan, and USA. That was Russia, which confined India's disclosure on the multipolar world after Cold War. And today it is Europe, which its much greater economic weight, technological strength, and normative power that promises to boost India's own request for a multipolar world and rebalanced Indo-Pacific region. That is all about this article. Now, next is protecting India's natural laboratories. Preserving geological heritage is as important as safeguarding biodiversity and cultural heritage. So this article is discussing about the importance of Himalayan belt in India, which provides not only protection from extreme weather, but also protect us from external aggression. All right, so it is a geological heritage that need to preserve. It is important as safeguarding biodiversity and cultural heritage. Now, context is what, like social diversity, India's geodiversity or variety of geological and physical elements of nature is unique. India has tall mountains, deep valleys, sculpted landforms, long winding coastlines, hot mineral springs, active volcanoes, diverse soil types, mineralized areas, and globally important fossil-bearing sites. That is long known as world's national laboratory for geoscientific learning. So broken loose from a supercontinent somewhere 150 million years ago, Indian landmass with all its strange looking plants and animals drifted northwards by itself for 100 million years and until it settled under the southern margin of the Asian continent. Then it got entwined with the world's youngest plate boundary. So geological features and landscapes that evolved over billions of years through numerous cycles of tectonic and climate upheavals are recorded in India's rock formations and terrains and are part of the country's heritage. So, for example, Kutch region in Gujarat that has dinosaur fossils, and that is our version of Jurassic Park. Tiruchirappalli region of Tamil Nadu, originally it belongs to Mesozoic Ocean. That is a storehouse of Cretaceous. That is somewhere 60 million years ago, Cretaceous marine fossils were used to find. So, to know how physical geography gets transformed into a cultural entity, we need to study the environmental history of the Indus River Valley. And one of the cradles of human civilization, that is. So India offers plenty of such examples, like geoheritage sites are educational spaces where people find themselves acquiring badly needed geological literacy, especially at a time when India's collective regard for this legacy is abysmal. Indian classrooms view disciplines like environmental science and geology with disdain compared to how they view other pure subjects like physics, biology, and chemistry. So the lack of interest in the government and our academic circles towards geological literacy is unfortunate at a time when we face crises like global warming. And as a climate of future is uncertain, decision making is very difficult in this region. So learning from the geological past, like warmer intervals during Miocene epoch, that is 23 to 5 million years ago, whose climate can be reconstructed using proxies and simulations, may serve as an analog for future climate. Awareness accrued through educational activities in geoheritage parks that will make it easy for us to memorialize past events of climatic change and appreciate the adaptive measures to be followed for survival. So the importance of the shared geological heritage of our planet was first recognized in 1991 at an UNESCO-sponsored event that was first international symposium on the conservation of our geological heritage. And the delegates got assembled in Degnay in France and endorsed the concept of shared legacy. That is, man and earth share a common heritage of which we and our governments are but the custodians. So this declaration foreseen the establishment of geoparks as sites that commemorate unique geological features and landscapes within their assigned territories, and as spaces that educate the public on geological importance. So these sites thus promote geotourism that generates revenue and employment. Then during 1990s, in late 1990s, that may be unconsidered, or that may be considered as a continuation with the Dine resolution. UNESCO's facilitated efforts to create a formal program that promotes a global network of geoheritage sites. And these were intended to complement the World Heritage Convention and UNESCO Man and the Biosphere program. So UNESCO provided guidelines for the developing national geoparks so that they become part of global geoparks network. Today, there are 169 global geoparks across 44 countries, like countries like Vietnam, Thailand. They have implemented laws to conserve their geological and natural heritage. Unfortunately, India does not have any such legislation and policy for the conservation. So the Geological Survey of India that has identified 32 sites as National Geological Monuments. There is not a single geopark in India that recognized by UNESCO. And that is despite the fact that India is a signatory to the establishment of UNESCO Global Geoparks. So this Geological Survey of India had submitted a draft legislation for geoheritage conservation to the Ministry of Mines in 2014, but it did not make any impact on it. So despite international progress in this field, the concept of geoconservation had not found much traction in India. Many fossil burying sites have been destroyed in the name of development, and this indifference, that is a strange as it may seem, given the current dispensation's penchant for crying itself hoarse about India's heritage, which is going to take a toll on our heritage. So the development juggernaut will soon overwhelm almost all our sites of geoheritage, like high concentration of iridium in the geological sector at Anjar, which is in Kutch district, that provides evidence for massive meteoritic impact that has caused the extinction of dinosaurs somewhere about 65 million years ago. And this site had been destroyed because of laying of new rail track in the area. Similarly, a National Geological Monument exhibiting a unique rock that is called nepheline syenite in Ajmer district of Rajasthan that destroyed in a road widening project. Similarly, Lonar Impact Crater in Buldhana district of Maharashtra, that is an important geoheritage site of the international significance. It is under threat of destruction. Conservation work is now in progress under high court supervision. So we are inching towards the disappearance of most of our geological heritage sites thanks to unplanned and booming real estate businesses. Many such features have been destroyed, and unregulated stone mining activities that has also contributed to this destruction. So this situation calls for immediate implementation of sustainable conservation measures like those formulated for protecting biodiversity. Natural assets that once destroyed never been created, and if they are uprooted they lose much of their scientific value. So protection of geoheritage site that requires legislation so that lawfully it can be protected. Biological Diversity Act that has been implemented in 2002, and now there are 18 notified biosphere reserves in India. Similarly, geoconservation should be a major guiding factor in land use planning. A progressive legal framework which is required to support such strategies. In 2009, there was a half-hearted attempt to constitute a national commission for heritage sites through a bill introduced in the Rajya Sabha. It was eventually referred to the Standing Committee. For some unstated reasons, the government backtracked and the bill was withdrawn. In 2019, a group of geologists under the auspices of Society of Earth Scientists had petitioned Prime Minister and ministers concerned about the need for a national conservation policy under the direct supervision of a national body, which is committed to the protection of geoheritage sites, but government's apathy still continues in the region. So basically, the crux of this article is what? That we are geologically heritage country. We have such heritage that needs to be protected by the law because in the past we have lost our heritage sites, geologically heritage sites, and it has impacted in the loss of species. All right. And for example, dinosaurs, if we had some evidences of dinosaurs in our country that need to be protected. Similarly, different types of landforms that also need to be protected, that need to be preserved and conservated. All right. And this can be done with the help of legislation. That is all about this article. Now, the next one is the sanctions cloud over India-US ties. The debate in the US hovers around the efficacy of CARTSA-related sanctions against India. So basically, CARTSA, that is under this this CARTSA is what? That is Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act. All right, so this is what? A sanction act that may be imposed on the country who is signatory of CARTSA with the USA. So it is the context of India and USA. So sanction cloud over India and USA ties, and debate in the US hovers around the efficacy of CARTSA related sanctions against India. So what is the efficacy that we'll talk about? So context is what? That Chief of Air Staff, that is Air Chief Marshal V.R. Chaudhary. He recently had said that the delivery of S-400 Triumph air defense system from Russia is expected according to the schedule. And in response, U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Wendy Sherman hoped that both USA and India could resolve the issue. So basically, India and Russia is having their different strategic partnership in which India had asked to deliver S-400 Triumph air defense system, which USA had said that India and USA could resolve this issue. It means some tensions had raised between India and USA because of this weapon deal between India and Russia. So issue here is that receiving the missile systems could attract for India's sanctions under Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act enacted by US Congress. Ms. Sherman emphasized that US thinks it's dangerous for any country that decides to use the S-400. And India is scheduled to receive 5 squadrons of the surface-to-air missile system under $5.43 billion, that is 40,000 crore rupees agreement that it signed 3 years ago. So Even though CAATSA that has been signed into law by the then President Donald Trump in 2017, India stuck to its guns, signed the agreement with Russia a year later, and paid an advance in 2019. So this missile system that was originally scheduled to be delivered between 2020 and 2023, and supplies are expected to commence now. So both India and Washington, India and USA have been in conversations over the deal. India has stressed on the tactical importance of the defense missile system, considering the environment in the Indian subcontinent. So, if when the CAATSA was passed, when US sought to discourage trade in the defense and intelligence sectors of Russia, country perceived to have interfered with 2016 US presidential election. And the act mandates a president to impose at least 5 of the 12 sanctions on persons that engaged in a significant transactions with Russian defense and intelligence sectors. So these sanctions include suspending export license, banning American equity debt, investment in entities, prohibiting loans from the US and financial institutions, and opposing loans from international financial institutions. So the act built in a safety valve in the form of presidential waiver. This comes CATSA, all right. And this was written into the law after such persuasion and is interpreted as one crafted to accommodate countries like India. So policy planners on either side, they are aware of the law and provisions to work around it. Ms. Sherman and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, they came to India earlier this year and cannot be expected to announce whether India can secure a waiver from President Joe Biden when time comes for the White House to make a decision. So the modified waiver authority allows the president to waive sanctions in the certain circumstances. He has to decide whether the move is in America or American interest, does not endanger country's national security, and affects its military operations in an adverse manner. Additionally, he has to determine whether country is questioned in taking steps to bring down its inventory of defense equipment from Russia and cooperating with Washington on matters of critical security. There are few more provisions that include one that allows for sanctions waivers for 180 days, provided the administration certifies that the country is in question is scaling back its ties with Russia. So, sorry. Now, so safety wall we are talking about. So basically, policy planners on either side, they are aware of law and provisions to work around this. Similarly, Ms. Sherman and Secretary of State Antony Blinken, they came to India in earlier this period. So that cannot be expected to announce whether India can secure a waiver from President Joe Biden when time comes for White House to make decisions over this. Modified waiver authority that allows president to waive sanctions in certain circumstances, and he has to decide whether the move is in American interest, it does not endanger country's national security, and affects its military operations in an adverse manner. In addition, he has to determine whether the country is in question is taking steps to bring down its inventory of defense equipment from Russia and cooperating with Washington on matters of critical security. For this, more provisions that includes one that allows for sanction waiver for 180 days, provided administration certifies that country in question in scaling back its ties with Russia. So debate in US hovers around the efficacy of such sanctions against India when geopolitical situation in region is undergoing a change. And there is a growing relationship between China and Russia, with both the countries seeking to expand engagement in Afghanistan, from where USA withdrew its military after 2 decades of war. India turned silent over manner in which US negotiated the exit deal with Taliban. And on the strategic plane, India remained on course by agreeing on the upgrading of the Quad security dialogue and sharing the same version as USA on the Indo-Pacific construct. The sanctions have tremendous potential of pulling down upward trajectory of the bilateral relationship between India and USA that spans 50 sectors, especially in the field of defense. And USA's apprehension is that bringing India under a sanction regime could push Delhi towards its traditional military hardware supplier, that is Russia. And a decade ago, influential segment of Indian political leadership and top bureaucracy remained wary of deeper engagement with US sanctions that can stir up the latent belief that Washington cannot be relied upon as a partner. Now, over the past decade, India's military purchase from Russia has steadily declined. India's import of arms decreased by 33% between 2011 and 15 and 16 and 20. And Russia was most affected supplier as per the report by Stockholm-based defense think tank SIPRI. Then in the recent years, there have been some big ticket deals worth $15 billion, which include S-400, KA-226T utility helicopters, BrahMos missiles, and production of AK-203 assault rifles. On the other hand, over the past decade, government-to-government deals with the US touched $20 billion and deals worth nearly $10 billion are under negotiation. US designated India as a major defense partner in 2016. It later gave India Strategic Trade Authorization 1, which allows access to critical technologies. Today, manufacturers in both the countries, they are exploring ways to co-develop and co-produce military equipment. There are advocates in US who strongly favor imposing sanctions on India following the USA's decision to impose restrictions on its NATO ally Turkey. China, that was the first country to attract provisions after it procured S-400. Should India be treated with a different yardstick then? So a section of intervention lawmakers in the Democratic Party hold a different view on this. Now, there must be three clear steps. And the first is the presidential determination on the waiver. Second is the referral to the congressional committees. And third is clearance by these panels. So while referral to the armed services is spelled out, it is distinct possibility that this will be sent to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. And this powerful committee, headed by Senator Bob Menendez, wrote to Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin ahead of this visit to New Delhi in March this year that he must inform India on the perils of the deal, while a Republican Todd Young on the panel argued against it. So the CARSA test will determine the course of the India-US strategic partnership. Will the Biden administration sail through opposition within his party is allowing India a clear passage. So the administration will have to do the heavy lifting, and the role of Indian Americans should be significant, just as they rallied around the support the historical civil nuclear deal in the face of stiff resistance from Democrats in opposed to nuclear proliferation. So that is all about this article. Moving on to the next, aiding Afghans. India could contribute to international agencies working with displaced Afghans. So what India should do in this? So basically, during a meeting of countries with world's highest GDPs, that was G20, Prime Minister Modi, Narendra Modi, he's spoken about looming humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan, especially when winter is coming nearby. He called for international community to provide Afghanistan with immediate and unhindered access to humanitarian assistance. So meeting came as UNHCR, United Nations Human Human rights, basically. So they published a new appeals for funds with the report that half the population, more than 20 million people, they are in need of life-saving humanitarian assistance. And UN has received only 35% of the funds needed for its relief operations. So as a result of this, Taliban takeover, most direct aid to Afghan government has dried up. Its reserves has been frozen by USA, making it impossible for salaries to be paid. Taliban government's refusal to allow women to work and its stopping girls from schooling have made situation more dire. So the recognition of the Taliban and any government engagement is a long way off. World is faced with the stark choice on how to ensure Afghanistan does not suffer further. At the summit, European Union committed to $1.15 billion for Afghanistan and neighboring countries where refugees have fled, while other countries, including USA and China, have pledged to $1.1 billion at a donor conference in Geneva last month. India has not announced any monetary or food assistance yet. So Prime Minister's words are a welcome sign that government remains seized of the welfare of ordinary Afghans, even as India has closed its embassy but maintains only a limited exchange with Taliban officials in Doha. And given the manner of the Taliban's takeover in August with support from Pakistan, maintaining links with terror groups, including those that target India, leaves the government hard put to increases its engagement or to send aid directly to the new regime. But India could contribute to international agencies. These are working with the displaced Afghans, particularly for about 1 million children at the risk of starvation. It could also help Iran and Central Asian states. They are housing refugees with monetary assistance. And government could also consider liberalizing its visa regime for Afghans, which at the moment has cancelled all prior visas to Afghan nationals. And it is releasing very few e-visas for Afghans desperate to travel here. So as a goodwill gesture, India could once again send food aid, including wheat, grain, fortified biscuits, and other packaged food directly to Kabul. Clearly, the imperative to act is now at what the UN Secretary General has called a make or break moment for the Afghan people, and to heed the warning that if the international community, which includes a regional leader like India, does not help starve to the unfolding humanitarian crisis, and not only Afghans but also the rest of the world will pay a heavy price for this. That is all about this article. Next one. Deconstructing climate finance. Developed countries are not close to meeting their targets. Context of this article is what in the run-up to the 26th conference of the parties of UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, media reports have claimed that developed countries, they are inching closer to the target to providing $100 billion in climate finance to developing countries by 2025. And the original target was 2020. This view has been bolstered by Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, that is OECD, that claimed that climate finance provided by developed countries had reached $78.9 billion in 2018. Now, there is lacking in the climate financing by the developed countries. So what is the issues behind it? So climate financing and issues associated with this. So these claims are erroneous. First, OECD figures include private finance and export credits. Developing countries, they insisted that in developed country, climate finance should be from public sources and should be provided as grants or as concessional loans. So OECD report makes it clear that public finance component amounted to only $62.2 billion in 2018, with bilateral funding of about $32.7 billion and $29.2 billion through multilateral institutions. Significantly, the final figure comes by adding loans and grants. And of the public finance component, loans comprise 74%, while grants make only 20%. So basically, climate financing that need to be given as a grant, not as a loan. But these countries, what they are doing, they are giving it as a public finance component that comprises of loan, which is 74% of the climate financing. And grants, they are only providing 20%. So grant is what that is given to the countries for which there is no return. But loan, if you developed countries are providing to developing countries, so they have to pay it back. And climate, that need prior action. Okay, we do not know whether we will succeed or not. Then what will happen? It will create a debt burden for those developing countries. So report does not say how much of the total loan component of $46.3 billion is concessional from 2016 to 18. 20% of the bilateral loans, 76% of loans provided by multilateral development banks, and 46% of loans provided by multilateral climate funds were non-concessional. Between 2013 and 18, the shares of loans has continued to rise while the share of grants had decreased. So the overwhelming provisioning of climate finance through loans risk exacerbates the debt crisis of many low-income countries. OECD reports on climate finance have long been criticized for inflating climate finance figures by including funds for development projects like health and education that only notionally target climate action. And the Oxfam report on climate finance discounts for the climate relevance of reported funds to estimate how much climate finance is actually targeting climate action, and also discounts for grant equivalence. So in contrast to the OECD report, Oxfam estimates that in 2017 2017-18, out of an average of $59.5 billion of public climate finance reported by developed countries, climate-specific net assistance ranged only between $19 and $22.5 billion per year. So hollowness of this OECD claim is also exposed by the accounts provided by the developed countries themselves in their biennial reports submitted by UNFCCC. And 2018 biennial assessment of UNFCCC's Standing Committee on Finance reports that on average, developed countries provided only $26 billion per year as climate-specific finance between 2011-16. And if these numbers are still open to challenge, this rose to an average of $36.2 billion in 2017-18. Now, US President Joe Biden, he recently said that USA will double its climate finance by 2024. But any claim that such a pledge will make USA as a leader in international climate finance is misleading. That is Congress that decide on the quantum after all. US also has a history of broken commitments, having promised $3 billion on the Green Climate Fund under President Barack Obama, but delivering only $1 billion before President Donald Trump withdrew US support from Global Climate Fund. So Mr. Biden, initially he promised only $1.2 billion on the Global Green Climate Fund that we fell short of what has already been owned. In any case, the future focus on US climate finance is the mobilization of private sector investment, as John Kerry, Special Presidential Envoy for Climate Change, has made it clear during his recent visit to India. Alongside claims that a few $1 trillion of private investments are being mobilized, he was clear that public finance would only contribute to de-risking of investment. And at the end of the day, the bulk of money coming in would be through private funds directed to these projects, judged bankable and not selected based on developing countries' priorities and needs. So regrettably, behind the rhetoric of mobilizing climate finance lies the grim reality of burdening G77 and its people with a fresh load of green debt. What is green debt? Green debt is new debt given for the green climate fund or green projects basically. So climate finance has also remained skewed towards mitigation despite the repeated calls for maintaining a balance between adaptation and mitigation. 2016 Adaptation Gap Report of UN Environment Programme has noted that annual cost of adaptation is in developing countries could range from $140 billion to $300 billion annually by 2030 and rise to $500 billion by 2050. Then delivering on the climate finance is fundamental to trust in the multilateral process, and regrettably, while developing countries will continue to pressure developed countries to live up to their promises, the history of climate negotiations is not in their favor. So basically, now, so that is all about this article. Moving on to the next one. Proposed amendments to the Forest Conservation Act are a bad idea. Now, here Forest Conservation Act. So amendment had been taken place in the Forest Conservation Act of 1980. What are these? That we'll talk about, and why it is called a bad idea. There are some concerns, so we'll talk about this. So forest that is difficult geographies to regulate as they must meet the competing regulatory requirement of conservation, development, and recognition of forest rights. So basically, one article we have discussed about climate financing, and it is another article forest conservation. So both are interrelated basically. So here forest or conservation or regulation to different difficult geographical areas, that becomes important to complete regulatory requirements of conservation, development, and recognition of the forest rights. Recognition of forest rights for whom? To whom? To tribal population. So on 2nd of October, Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change had issued a letter documenting 14 aspects that it seeks to change in key forest legislation. That is Forest Conservation Act 1940. So this law has been instrumental in reducing deforestation as it requires approval from the central government when forests have to be diverted from non-forestry purposes. All right. So whenever forest land need to be utilized for the non-forestry purposes and deforestation has to be taking place, that could only be done with the prior permission or approval by the central government under Forest Conservation Act of 1980. So the regulatory mechanism of forest clearances allows the ministry to deliberate on whether deforestation should be permitted or not, and what the conditions should be if such a permit is granted. Now, so being an essential part of the forest clearance process is the requirement that forest rights be recognized and consent of the Gram Sabha be obtained. Why? Because this is the decentralization process. Gram Sabha, basically, they are the ground people. That is the assembly of ground people. So they know better than any other authority or any other level as what Gram Sabha knows about the forest. So the set of issues that ministry seeks to use as a basis of the changing the law are mostly in the direction of deregulation, and they show some intent of giving the law more teeth, like the identification of forest areas which are to be maintained as pristine area for a prescribed period of time. So the present government has been working towards amending, changing, and recrafting environmental laws in India since 2014. Some contentious attempts that have been the draft environment impact assessment notification, where it sought to create exemptions to the requirement of environmental clearance or a set of industries. In 2019, it proposed amendments to the Indian Forest Act 1927 with disastrous provisions that gave Forest Department wide discretionary powers that include the power to shoot at sight. And these amendments have been revoked because of sharp criticism from environmental movements across the country. These amendments that propose to the Conservation Act 1980 cannot be seen in isolation of these other attempts to remake environmental laws in India. So environmental law has emerged as a space for the government to re-engineer the governance architecture to make it more conducive for doing business. And the ease of doing business has signified a pathway towards deregulation. Deregulation in the context refers to undoing environmental safeguards and remaking laws in ways that constrain their ability to scrutinize anti-environmental decisions taken by the ministry. So the proposed amendments to the Forest Conservation Act, which when seen in the slide, work to restrict the scope of applicability of the act, and it does so by critiquing the current definition of forest that includes land recognized as forest by government as well as that which comes under the dictionary meaning of forest land based on the Supreme Court decision in T.N. Godavarman case. So that aims to explicitly define what does not constitute forest by creating a set of exceptions to the act. And these exceptions include forest in border areas where strategic projects need to be built, private land where plantations are to be established, forest land which was acquired before 1980 for the construction of railways and highways. So these are those lands which is kept out of the purview of the forest or definition of forest. Now, carbon sink. So the emphasis is on creating an enabling regulatory environment for setting up plantations, as India needs to create a carbon sink. It argues that these plantations will not attract the provision of Forest Conservation Act. And then how plantations to be regulated when deforestation occurs. So it does not define when the nature of these plantations should be and where they can take place. Then extension of oil drilling. So amendment seeks to deregulate by reducing scrutiny over so amendment seeks to deregulate by reducing scrutiny over certain decisions to deforest, like use of extended oil drilling for extraction of oil and gas, which ministry says is environment friendly and qualifies for legal exception. So there have not been sufficient ecological studies to support this. And indeed, these exceptions enable deforestation as opposed to regulating it. Next is public consultation need to be partaken. So proposed amendments, these are listed as a set of issues without detailing what the amendments are going to be. that makes it difficult for citizens and experts to partake in a public consultation process. So the proposed amendments are not translated into other languages and provide a very short window for 15 days to provide comments. So this tactic of limiting citizen participation prevents citizen oversight on these anti-environmental decisions. Now, third tier and forest conservation. So that was realized that an integral part of the forest clearance process is the requirement of the consent of the Gram Sabha. And this was the hard-won legal battle after many years of struggle by forest dwelling communities, it means tribals, and that have been at the forefront of avoiding destructive development projects. So creation of exceptions to the requirement of forest clearances directly results in the cancellation of the application of this progressive legal provisions. This will be a step towards undoing a democratic decision-making framework and tilting power towards the state. Now, consultation is required. So changes being proposed to the Forest Conservation Act that need to be done in consultation with forest dwellers or dwelling communities whose livelihood and rights are likely to be affected by the remaking of this law. And ministry, they as of now they made no such attempts to do this. So it becomes imperative that decisions on the identification of forest, non-forest areas be made in consultation with the forest dwelling communities to ensure that they do not violate any forest rights or that their views are adequately considered if it falls within a community conserved area. So in conclusion, deregulatory approach to changes being made to India's environmental laws needs to be scrutinized. And as the climate crisis looms over us, limiting deforestation should guide regulatory decision making, not compensating with the plantation. So basically regulation needs to be there, decision making needs to be there, but compensation with plantation should also be guided. Now, next one. Tackling terror. Civil society, political forces must do their best to remove fear among minorities in Jammu and Kashmir. So basically, this article is in the context of the terror issues or terror challenges going on in Jammu and Kashmir against non-Muslims. So uptick in the number of deaths of civilians, including those of the minority community after terror attacks recently taken place, is a major setback when number of violent incidents in Kashmir Valley was the lowest in 5 years. So orchestrated allegedly by the shadowy force calling itself Resistance Front, the Resistance Front, that is TRF, they termed by security forces as being set up by the LET, Lashkar-e-Taiba. And the killings have resulted in fear gripping the valley's minority Hindu and Sikh communities. So notwithstanding statements from mainstream political parties and separatist organizations, they are condemning the violence. Many Kashmiri Pandits and Sikh employees abstained from work or took leave temporarily, worried about their security. So this is an unfortunate outcome that calls to mind the exodus of Kashmiri Pandits due to terror attacks in the early 1990s. And the reversal of this dangerous trend requires not only a reassurance of security from the government for members of the minority communities like Pandits and Sikhs, but also a commitment of solidarity with the victims from the various political forces and civil society. So targeted nature of the killings by faceless terror groups suggests that its aim was to use the disquiet in the valley with the recent administrative and political measures to foment communal discord and violence. So such condemnation from the polity, civil society in such situations must take initiative to foster communal amity and to mobilize people across communities against hatredness. And in this regard, the recent appeals by some masjid in Srinagar, they are requesting the people to show solidarity with the victims and to prevent the furthering of fear among Kashmiri Pandits as a welcome step, indicating an intention of not let the situation deteriorate to what has happened in the early 1990s, that is displacement of Kashmiri Pandits from Kashmir. So in UT administration, that is Jammu and Kashmir's administration, followed up with a strong crackdown on the insurgency seeking to isolate and quell the military network that is allegedly responsible for the attacks. And the reaction from the polity and civil society and the administrative actions by the government are necessary. They are not sufficient to restore normalcy in the valley. The suspension of the polity with the absence of an elected assembly and stasis and alienation that had set in since the abrogation of Jammu and Kashmir special status. Its bifurcation and designation as a UT would make the job of administration even more difficult. And an immediate renewal of political dialogue to address this along with the restoration of statehood and complete resumption of political and press freedoms will help create environment to isolate and tackle terror in the region. So basically, um, to tackle terror in Jammu and Kashmir, what can be done? Renewal of political dialogue need to be taken place along with restoration of the statehood and complete resumption of political and press freedoms need to be given. It will help the environment to isolate and tackle terror in the region. Next article, that is about Gati Shakti scheme. So fast forward, Gati Shakti can cut logistics cost if it can convince all states to come on board. So basically, Gati Shakti, a few days ago, Prime Minister of India has announced about this. So this master plan will take up all such infrastructure developmental project, and on time it will complete it. Multi-model project basically. So with the Gati Shakti National Master Plan, Prime Minister has launched on 13th October, has expanded on the familiar theme that India's slowing economic growth engine can find renewed momentum through major infrastructure upgrades that will cut logistics cost for industry and raise all-round efficiency. So essentially, a technocentric administrative initiative that promises silo-breaking integration of 16 ministries, including railways, roads, ports, through information technology, satellite mapping, and data tools. Program seeks to appeal to the national imagination as an umbrella integrator of rupees 111 lakh crore worth of projects under National Infrastructure Pipeline for 2020-25. So importance given in the plan to railroad multimodal connectivity and higher share of freight for the railways, which is articulated by Niti Aayog, has evidently multiple benefits. So that include reducing the cost of logistics to GDP that has prevailed at about 14%, and at the time when NDA government took office to an aspirational 8%. So there is also a challenge of reducing vehicle emission from road freight growth in order to meet climate change commitments and containing input costs due to extraordinarily high taxes on diesel. And a similar fillip to efficiency in port operations can increase cargo handling capacity and cut vessel turnaround time. So eventually, wait a second. Yeah. So states have crucial role in all such construction or implementation of infrastructure projects that consider that the key pieces of the plan, such as port linkages and land availability for highways, railways, industrial clusters, and corridors, that depends on political consensus and active partnership. Now, the observations in the economic survey taken place for 2020-21 underscored the role of active center-state partnership for infrastructure building, and the survey projects maximum investments towards national infrastructure projects sectors like energy, road, urban infrastructure, and railways for financial year 2021 and 22, with about 8.5 lakh crore to be invested by either um, site annually. Besides, rupees 4 lakh crore per year from the private sector. So there is a steep gradient to cover here, as the effects of COVID-19 continue to be felt in terms of lost jobs, depressed wages, and consumption. The planners, they are pinning their hopes on infrastructure projects for a New Deal outcome that will boost jobs and demand for goods and commodities, besides attracting major investments. All right. So what are the concerns in the project? So basically, significant delays in the project that often to be traced to incompatible and hostile land acquisition. So basically, land acquisition is one of the problem. Incompatibility of land is one of the problem. So that alienate communities or threaten to violate environmental integrity. Now, the center's preference for gadgetic information system and remote sensing to identify potential industrial areas, policymakers would do well to reclaim lands already subjected to the degradation and pollution rather than alienate controversial new parcels. So, convincing citizens that they stand to benefit from such grant plans through better social welfare and lower services cost, higher efficiency, and respecting federal boundaries while dealing with the states other with the states and other imperatives. So basically here citizens need to be convinced, and they need to stand to take benefit from such grand plans through better social welfare. Lower service cost need to be given, higher efficiency needs to be there, and federal boundaries need to be respected. Federal boundaries, it means a relationship between center and state. So for example, if such projects would be there, so for example, multi-modal project of railway or road network. So road or railway that passes from one state to another. All right. So here, both these states need to come together to provide land. Okay, because every state is having their own land settlements and land agreements. So basically, this need to be simplified. All right. So they need to respect federal boundaries while dealing with these states, and other imperatives are also there. All right. So if Gati Shakti or infrastructural development plan need to be worked efficiently under Gati Shakti plan, then all such issues need to be resolved. Then multi-modal projects under this plan, railways or roadways, that need to be worked upon. All right. So this is all about this article, and these are all about the day. So these are all such important editorials published in the Hindu and Indian Express we have discussed over here. We'll meet up with another set of articles on next Sunday. Till then, have a nice day. Bye-bye. Have a nice weekend. Take care.